Now, did I pull up the YouTube page? Nope.
I mean, you don't really need to as much because you can do comments.
Yeah, you have
Oh,
the
that's
power.
true. Carrie, you're so smart. I'm only working with like 2% of my brain and it's all Inferno right now. I'm trying to figure out this new lighting in my room, which I think makes me look really pale.
Or is it an angelic glow from heaven?
That's
Paradise.
right.
You know what?
Like Beatrice.
I'm cosplaying as Beatrice. This woman Dante is like down bad for.
Big
time.
fan. Big fan of Beatrice.
Oh, did he give up already? I gave my cat a cat puzzle because Carrie can attest to this. He was screaming as loud as he could.
It was adorable.
It was very cute.
Puzzle?
Yeah, so I don't want to pull it up now because I think he's still. Oh no, you might have solved the whole thing. Did you do it? Oh my god, you're so smart, buddy. Oh, that's so nice. So it's basically a little bento box with sushis.
Aww.
And I put the treat in here, and he's supposed to like figure out, okay, I move this, and then I, take the treat out.
What a smart boy.
I know. It's a beginner puzzle. But we just bought a more advanced one for him to see if you can do one with different. Oh no, there's no treat in there, buddy.
You lied to me. You said
you're trying
You're so big. I can't give you more. Oh yeah, but for viewers who don't know, I moved in with my boyfriend, which means I now have a new cat.
Baby.
Blurred.
Hi, handsome boy.
His name is Lan, which stands for lazy ass nuisance. He lives up to 2 of those 3. He's lazy and he can be an ass sometimes, but he's never a nuisance.
Yeah, we love him.
So I have to leave super fast to let him out of the room because he's screaming. Don't be alarmed. But
we'll be prepared.
So I think we can probably get started now if you guys want to do introductions. So welcome to Past It Classics, everyone. And we are going to be talking about Dante's Inferno. But before that, I would love to introduce Cara and Julia. So if you two could just introduce yourselves and your channel and your history with Dante's Inferno. Like, is this your first time reading it? Had you only heard of it? Had you seen memes about it? Stuff like that.
Very important background to have.
Mm-hmm. I'll go first, I guess. So I'm Julia. My channel is Shakespeare and Such. Don't worry about my channel. Just follow my Instagram and my Twitter, and there will be videos sometime in life. You'll see them. It's fine. But I kind of read across the board. Mainly right now, a lot of nothing, but typically a lot of classics, historical fiction, some romance, a mix. And I have read Inferno before. I read it in high school because I don't know whether pretentious or lazy is actually the more accurate description. Let me give you some context. We had like our high school, and then we had our rival high school, and then we had this third building that used to be an elementary school that became the alternative high school. And so if you had any like specialized interests that didn't have classes at your school or the rival school, or you just like wanted some kind of different course, you could apply to go to that school just for like some classes, because the shuttle would just like take you back and forth. The shuttle, it's a regular school bus. And so I did all my junior and senior year English classes there, which means I did not read like any normal people, like American Lit, Brit Lit, all those like best known ones, did not read them. But I took weird classes for English, and I read about cults and Aung San Suu Kyi and I read Dante's Inferno. So a lot of stuff. I meant to read the whole Divine Comedy before this live show. It did not happen, but I'm still working on it. Yeah.
Oh, and super quickly, could you tell me the translator of the book version you read?
Oh, yeah.
I just realized I was supposed to ask you guys about that beforehand so you would know ahead of time. And then
I can just grab it.
I
have 2 editions. Oh, I'm falling. This is the one that I read in high school. So I was kind of referencing this one because it has the actual Italian in it, plus a translation by Robert M. Durling, which I preferred to this translation, which is Robin Kirkpatrick.
Okay.
This one to me was like a lot more poetic, and this felt like a more literal translation, which in like some cases was helpful and in some cases felt like goofy. And I was like, I don't think this should sound so silly. Like I don't know in your editions if it like the malbolge, I don't know how to pronounce it, whatever. But in this translation, it's just called rotten pockets. And I'm like, this is too whimsical. I don't think we should call it that.
It sounds like the cursed version of Hot Pockets.
Rotten pockets. A good SNL skit. Yes, so, and Nana, it's originally in Italian.
Nice.
I don't know if I had anything else to say. I have not given it a rating, by the way, because I want to read all 3 chunks, but I don't know. It's probably like a 3 stars for me right now. I have very mixed feelings. I don't know if you asked that, but I'm giving that information willingly.
Yeah, I mean, we can do ratings now too. Kara, would you like to go?
Yes. So, hi everyone. My name is Kara. My channel is Wild Book Garden. I also read very widely across genres and age ranges. I read a lot of fantasy, historical fiction, nonfiction, contemporary, which I never thought would happen. Like high school Kara would be shocked. Also sprinkle in some romance. Obviously, I read classics, and I just recently started another middle grade themed project, middle grade and young adult. So, yeah, if you like book club discussion type things, we're going to be doing a lot more of those. And I have never read the Divine Comedy before, like any part of it. But I have seen like quotes and references. I feel like I've read excerpts for various things. I have seen some memes here and there. It was really weird though, actually reading it and realizing, oh, I have like literally no idea what this is actually about, like what actually happens in it. Like the only thing I really knew is that Dante is like led by Virgil through hell, purgatory, and heaven. I had no idea about like the context, that this is basically like like an Ebenezer Scrooge type thing. Almost, where Beatrice is like, you better straighten up, buddy. Like, look what could happen to you. At least that's what it felt like. I could not find my translator. Like, it's not in my book. I tried Googling it. I have no idea. Yeah, I think that is super weird. I imagine that it's probably whichever one is most common, but like I can't find that information anywhere. So yeah, to be continued maybe. Yeah, I also feel like this translation, like some of it was really beautiful and then some of it was just like oddly silly. So that was an interesting experience, but I also meant to read the whole thing and I did not. I like read the part we needed to, which was Inferno, and then I just put it down, and then I like read one canto like every 4 days basically. So I have not made it very far. But I would also give it. Yeah. I would also give it like a 3 stars right now, I think. Yeah, like Julia was saying, I have mixed feelings. Some things were really great and some things I'm like, what are you doing, Dante? So
he's writing his fanfic. Leave him alone.
He really is. I mean, to be fair, he did not intend for it to become a foundational text for Western literature, you know? Like he was just having a good time with Virgil.
Yeah, I love all of the like Dante Virgil fanfic elements of it. Like Dante's writing himself constantly swooning into Virgil's arms, and Virgil's like, Dante, not only are you handsome and smart, your mom was so lucky to give birth to you. I remember reading that and I was like, that's really weird.
I think one of the funniest ones is like when Virgil has to like carry him somewhere and he's just got him like embraced and Dante's like like safe in his arms. Like
A little bridal carry, like, come on.
yeah. It's just really funny.
So for me, well, I'm Taylor from Page Screen Taylor, and I think right now Cara has the only active, like, consistently uploading channel of the three of us.
More power to you.
Yeah. But when I do post and when I do read, I'm recently climbing out of the depths of a reading slump, which is nice. But I tend to read mostly romance, classics, some contemporary. I'm really on an Ellen Hildebrand phase right now. And
We're nodding. We're like, we knew it was coming.
you know it's coming. I'm currently reading Summer of '69, and I'm already coming across so many weird names. Like, why is this kid named Tiger?
No, not Tiger.
Or Pickford.
Was he his parents' least favorite? Like, ouch.
He apparently was born and grew up in a commune in like the 60s or late 50s, and I'm like, who lives in a commune and names their kid Pickford?
Right?
Yeah, that does not.
Such a little rich boy name.
Right. Pickford is not a commune name. Tiger, maybe.
So in terms of Dante's Inferno, this is my second time reading it. I read it in college. Thank you, Lan. I read it in college my sophomore year. I read the entire Divine Comedy. I will say the Divine Comedy peaked with this. Purgatorio's fine. Like, I liked it well enough. And Paradiso is like, God, all the goody two-shoes are in here. These are just people Dante liked.
Taylor, you're not giving us a lot of hope here. We're trying to keep reading.
I actually, like,
Sorry.
I'm only a few cantos into the Purgatory section, and I was actually liking it. I'm finding it easier to follow than Inferno, but maybe that's also because I'm just, like, not as worried about getting stuff. I'm like, yeah.
Sure.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I think when I first read it, I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars, but reading it again, I'm like, it moves a lot slower than I remembered, particularly when he's talking to people I don't particularly care about.
Yeah.
You know, he's not talking to like Dido or something, so I'm like, move along, move on. There's nothing to see here. I find it still very interesting and compelling, but if I had to rate it again, it would probably be a 3.5 star book. I still really like it, but it's not as awesome as I thought it was. And as for Nana, Lamb would rate it, if he could read, probably 2 out of 5. It would require him to move through hell, and so he doesn't like thinking about moving.
That's fair, baby.
So I want to go into some trigger warnings super fast. We might not talk about all of these, but if you're looking to read this book, it's good to be aware. So we've got homophobia, anti-Semitism, torture, suicide and self-harm, non-explicit, and gore and body horror. So just to be aware, Dante gets quite creative with some of the punishments. My first question for you guys is, the book sort of splits the character of Dante into two people. Dante the pilgrim, who is undergoing this journey, and Dante the poet, who is writing about the journey. Do you feel like these identities are separate entities, or are they the same to you in your mind?
It's a very thoughtful question. I love it.
Yeah.
I think the separation I felt for Dante was mainly like between like the majority of the story, him as a pilgrim and, you know, recounting his experiences with Virgil, and then like the kind of weird like prologue almost. So I think of like the split as more of a like time thing than like his identity. Because I feel like Dante as the poet is like a distinct like writing style, but I feel like he's using that pretty consistently throughout the story. Like something will happen and he'll kind of immediately reflect on it.
Mhm.
It felt like.
I
Yeah.
like the idea of it being separate times.
Yeah.
Julia, what are your thoughts?
I would definitely agree with what you just said, Kara. I think that was well stated. As I was reading it, I kind of felt like the like pilgrim aspect was kind of like the archetypal role he was fulfilling in the story, but despite that, he was still like Dante the poet, but he was fulfilling that role of like pilgrim going on the journey.
Mhm.
So they were like mostly combined to me, but yeah, that makes sense to kind of think of it as like what happened versus his recounting of the events.
Yeah, so sort of like what you two are saying is like Dante the Pilgrim will become Dante the poet, who is currently writing it. Is that sort of what
Yeah.
you're saying?
And kind of like rather than I feel like a lot of times when there's like a story structure where a character is like reflecting on something later, I feel like usually it's like the whole thing happens and then the reflection part. Whereas I feel like with this one, it was kind of throughout. Like something would happen and Dante would be talking about it in the moment, but then there'd be kind of this like shift into like even more poetic Dante where he's thinking of it more like, here's how I'm going to write about it, you know? So
Mm.
it felt like that was interspersed, I guess, throughout the story rather than all of the reflection happening at the end.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I find, I think when I first read it back in college, I didn't, thank you, Lan, I didn't understand what was like that there was a difference between Dante the Pilgrim and Dante the Poet, which in my defense, there is a lot of like Dante having his like literary heroes and like the greatest minds of all time come up to him and go like, "Man, Dante, you're so smart and you're also a Christian, so you're going to heaven, but we wish you could stay here and party with us."
Big fan, Dante. I love your work.
Which I do kind of love though. But I understanding that there's a difference between the two now, I think it sort of lends itself to a very different reading, and it comes across a little less self-indulgent than
Hmm.
the idea that they're both the same person.
Yeah. I also, and I can't take credit for this observation because I don't even remember where I read it, but it was one of the places that I saw this excerpted or talked about. And they were, I think it was maybe talking about like language and like the power of language with the failings of language. And they used this as an example of how there are multiple times throughout the story, and I think even more in the later sections, where Dante will be unable to describe something. And so his description is basically, I cannot tell you what this, like, I don't have words for this. You'll just have to trust me. And I thought that was really interesting. And I feel like that kind of goes with what you were saying, Taylor, about the, like the separation of poet and pilgrim makes him like a little bit less, like this makes it a little bit less of like a self aggrandizing, like I'm just the best writer in the world. It's like there are still parts where he's like, I can't tell you what this looks like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, bringing that up, I wonder, not to bring up HP Lovecraft on my channel, but the whole like, this is so horrible, I can't even describe it to you, does remind me of the sort of Lovecraftian horror where what you're looking at, like, you cannot even describe. It's just so awful.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if there was some inspiration
Mm,
that HP Lovecraft picked up from Dante.
yeah.
Well,
And
yeah.
I think like in the later, probably in the paradise section, I'm trying to remember when I was reading this like analysis, they were saying sometimes it was a really beautiful thing, like a really good thing,
Mhm.
that it's like Dante could not contain in like, you know, human language or something. So sometimes it's like scary and sometimes it's like beautiful. I think that's interesting combination.
Yeah.
I love that.
I love that this is like such a like there are two kinds of people because Taylor was like, yeah, it's like very Lovecraftian horror, and I was like, that's so Sarah J. Maas, the way she'd be like, it's so beautiful, I could never paint it. That's what I
Stop. You're not wrong.
Listen, both can be true.
But I do love, on a more serious note, that idea of like it's so indescribable because of like the sheer horror or like the wonder, the awe that I was in, because those are genuinely two. Okay, it looks like I tabbed a lot. I really didn't. But two of the things that I was keeping track of is whenever like Dante mentioned fear and whenever he mentioned like awe of something, and they are like almost equally mentioned. So it was very interesting to me.
Oh, that's such a cool like thing to track. I never even thought of that.
I'm a theme
We should
gal.
have like we could have
A theme
congealed
girly.
into one brain for that class I took in college. Let's see. So something I found interesting was that Dante includes a lot of people from Greek and Roman mythology, even though this book is based off of Christian theology, specifically Catholicism. So why do you think he thought to include, you know, Ulysses and, you know, he spoke a lot about Persephone or Proserpina. You know, why do you think he chose to do that?
For me, it really, like a lot of reading this harkened back to our discussions about, oh my gosh, what's the super long title of it?
Yes, I was the nobility and excellence of
book.
women.
Because of like the time period and it being like mythology. Taylor, are you still here, or are you just doing the Spirit of Lamb? I hope you're still here. Okay, great.
Yeah, I am. Sorry, I need to grab my charger, so I can still hear you though.
Cool. Just making sure I don't need to panic. But like all of the mythology and like stories essentially equating to like history in that time. It's like, yeah, these are relevant points that I can make in an argument because we weigh them all equally. Plus, considering that we specifically were reading Inferno and that anyone who didn't believe in a Christian God was heading right over there, it's like, yeah, we got a lot more of those too because they were non-believers.
Yeah.
Jesus, sorry, I keep pulling on my charger on accident, and so my laptop goes every time.
I know. I bump mine all the time. Yeah, I really like that connection you made, Julia. Like right as you were saying, it reminds me of like I started thinking about the one we just did because of all those like mythological examples. I also feel like it's an indicator, much like Dante is a big fanboy about Virgil. I feel like just Renaissance Italy in general was like super obsessed with like ancient Greece and ancient Rome. So I feel like that kind of makes sense that like those are like the greatest hits basically is like all of these classical like thinkers and storytellers and characters. And there are some more like modern to his time people as well. And something else that I thought was really interesting about this, because Julia, you mentioned like even though Dante's like, wow, I admire like you guys are such great writers, like sucks you're not Christian though, like bye. Like, one thing that I did think was really interesting, one of the things that I marked throughout the book, because it like really caught my attention, is there are a few times where Virgil or somebody else, I think maybe even Dante sometimes, he'll at least ask about it. There's like some indication that like someday they might end up in paradise, which I thought was really interesting. Like I think the concept is called universal salvation. And that was like not a not a popular idea at the time. And he's still like very like lukewarm about it. Like Dante's not going around being like, "You're still a good person, you can get there." But I do think it's really interesting in like a story that is overall, you know, the whole point of him going through hell and seeing all these people is like they're non-believers, like you were saying, Julia. I mean, we do see that they did like horrible things. It's not just like they only ended up here because of that, unless you're Virgil, I guess. Um, but I do think it's interesting that a story that is so structured on, you know, like Christianity being the only way, there are actually quite a few, like I took pictures of the pages. There's like quite a few places where um there is like some indication, like even if it's going to be a long time, like at one point I think Virgil says like they like people who don't believe, it's like they'll be there for like 30 times longer than their time on earth unless their time is shortened by prayers of people on earth, which is still a long time and would be very unpleasant. I'm not saying it isn't, but I do think it's interesting that there was that kind of like I wasn't expecting that to happen at all. So I was like, okay, Dante,
Yeah.
like, interesting. He's like, maybe you have a chance. Maybe. We'll see.
Little bitty.
Yeah.
I will say, and then I will say that like it does seem really unfair. Like I don't agree with the idea that if you don't believe in God, you go to hell, but it does seem
Right.
especially unfair to the people who were born pre-Jesus.
Yes.
Like, what chance
okay,
did
what
they
a
have?
rotten deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
Sure
That's
you get
always
a palace, but like seems weird.
Yeah, I know. And I think like depending on like who you're listening to, I feel like the modern church, at least in some denominations, is like much less like they're pushing that a lot less. Like I think there's more acknowledgement that like that's a pretty messed up thing to teach. We're not really not really doing that anymore. But yeah, definitely in Dante's time that would have been like, well, sucks to suck. Like
um so, and I do have a link pulled up for this. But was there a circle of hell that was more interesting, or was there a standout punishment for you? So not which one you'd rather be punished with, but one where you're like, okay. Like you've either found it really interesting or harsh or just sort of goofy.
I can answer like both sides of that spectrum. So the the only circle where when it was being described that I was like literally like dry heaving, like I can't stand the thought of this. And I don't remember, maybe it's like the 9th circle. It's pretty deep. Basically they were like lepers and they were just peeling their skin away, and it was described as like so scaly.
Ugh.
So gross. I hate it, you guys.
yeah.
And I don't even remember. I think they were like, there was like an alchemist in the canto. I can't remember what the actual like circle was described as right now. I just need to find my one note that says ew, and then I'll not the right one. This is so gross. Oh yeah, I wrote barf actually is what it is. Falsifiers. That's what they were. It was the falsifiers, wherever they were.
Okay.
So not good. No bueno. The one that I find most interesting, both kind of in terms of punishment and just like the people that we spoke to in that canto, was for lust. That whole section, I'm like, this is so cool. Like it shouldn't be cool, but it's cool because it's like the winds are like, you know, buffeting them around, and it's like so metaphorical to like, you couldn't contain your passions and now you're just like thrown about willy-nilly. But then like the actual story, I think, Cara, I don't know if this was when you were on Instagram, if you got to see my story that I shared about this, or if I don't know if either of you saw this. I am obsessed with that like little couple that we met for like
Oh, I
3
remember you
paragraphs.
telling me about this.
I need an entire book about them because I don't know if either of you read the footnotes about that particular story, but it was like the woman, when she had to, like, because it was an arranged marriage, when she was supposed to get married to her husband, his brother was like the, what do you call that? The
stand-in, the proxy.
The stand-in. Yes, it was like a marriage by proxy. So at first she was like, oh, this is my husband. It was not her husband. It was her brother-in-law. So like saucy already, but not her fault. She didn't intend for it to be saucy. Yeah. And then I guess like it's, you know, a true story. And then the records from history are basically like, yeah, and then her husband accused them of like being in love and murdered them both. And I was like, oh, it's so dramatic. And I love it.
I think you should write that book, Julia. I would read it.
Yeah, I would too.
If I can find some like historical documents about them, it's all over.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that one.
One that I found like really disgusting. I mean, there were a lot of them, but I was just like scanning through the descriptions, and the one that I remember being like, oh, gross. Okay, no, was the like diseases one where they were like in sewage or something, and I'm like, okay, no. So yeah, that was gross. I also thought it was interesting that not all of the punishments to me seemed thematically connected to the sins. Like some of them were, but there were a lot of them where I'm like, this seems random. Which I don't know, I just thought that was interesting. I guess I was expecting it to be a lot more symbolic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I also, let me try to find the other thing. Sorry, I have Wikipedia open right now because I'm like, what was the order of events here?
No, totally fair.
One thing I thought was interesting, and this was another thing that I have seen people talk about, so I can't take credit for noticing this. Like I knew to pay attention to it. But I found it super interesting that like the deepest circle of hell is frozen. Just because that's so different from like the fire imagery that happens so often. I just find that really, really interesting. Like, yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was like a really interesting image. I do think it was weird when Dante and Virgil were like climbing up like the hair of like the devil. I don't know. Like what? I thought that was like strange. And then the world flipped upside down. It was interesting, but the cold imagery I thought was just very, I keep saying interesting. I need another word, but you know.
I mean, it was. I thought that was like you said, very interesting, but I'm wondering entirely what the thought process Dante had in making hell, like the deepest pit of hell, cold. And I mean, this is just my imagination running away with it. But I want, like, I am sort of envision it as, you know, when something's so cold it sort of burns. Like it's that cold, so it feels like you're being burned, but you're like freezing.
Yeah.
And it was, I can't remember if it was in the text or like one of the footnotes that I was reading, but the way it was described as like, because everything's frozen there, it's like this silence that's unlike all the other circles because they're frozen. They can't scream out in agony. And so I was like, ooh, that's kind of creepy.
Yeah. And even like the imagery of some of it, like, I mean, at least on this Wikipedia description, it's talking about like how their tears are like frozen in their eyes, like just very like visceral images that are so different from all of the other circles.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Just I like keep forgetting what I was gonna say because I'm like trying to take notes at the same time. But like another thing, like Taylor, I really like what you said about like cold and burning. And I also wonder if part of it could be, I think there's like some references in the text to like separation, like hell being like separation from like heaven and God and goodness and all of that. And I feel like the connection between loneliness and cold makes a lot of sense to me rather than like, you know, loneliness and heat or fire. So that was another
It's
thought
sort of like
I had.
you're further from God's light, so you're further from the
Yeah.
warmth.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's so good.
It's insightful.
There were a couple that stood out to me, and the ones that seemed to be tied explicitly to the sin I thought were the most interesting. And I do feel like the ones that didn't really have a direct tie to the sin, Dante was just like, I just thought of the most messed up thing possible. I'm putting in here.
Yeah, exactly.
The one that I found interesting was how gluttony and sloth were in the same circle, and gluttony, they were like wrestling in the mud like little pig boys, and for sloth they were underneath the mud so they couldn't move and they were stuck. And I thought that was like just like really interesting.
Yeah.
And another torture that's like it's bad, but it's not like being torn apart by harpies bad. But the homophobic chapter where like he comes across his old teacher and like the quote unquote sodomites. The fact that they had to run, I was like, that is so mean. I hate running.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of other reasons why it's mean and cruel.
No, but it's yeah.
But running,
Running for eternity? Put me under the mud.
Yeah.
And that's why I
Yeah.
would be in sloth.
yeah.
Yeah. I also appreciate, as I'm like scanning through these descriptions here, it didn't feel like the sins didn't feel as gendered as I maybe would have expected. Like I was pleasantly surprised by I mean, I think a lot of the people he ends up talking to are men, possibly like all of them or almost all of them, because like of course their writings are the ones that we remember. But like when they're talking about like people punished for lust, for example, like you would kind of expect it to be a lot of women because that's what the like prevailing thought was. But it's not. It's like pretty equal opportunity.
Yeah.
I love anytime Cesare Borgia gets a smackdown. Like that just makes me so
Yeah.
happy. I was like, yeah, nail that fucker. Like I hate him.
Good times.
Yeah. Like me
Oh.
and Dante agree on some things. And one of them is that Cesare Borgia is a piece of shit.
It's the only politician that he named, and I was like, oh, I know who that is.
I know
Everyone
that
else,
boy.
I'm like, I feel like these people bullied you in school.
Okay, like the weird like contrast between like really, really, really famous people like Ulysses and Virgil and all of this, and then there's these people where I'm like, was this just like a mayor of your town who you didn't like? Like this is so specific.
Mhm.
It's like me writing a book and putting like, I don't know, the head of like transportation in my city in hell because I have to pay $2.40 to ride the subway.
Yeah, like
I
it
mean,
just feels very specific.
did I tell you guys? I know I didn't in this live show, but I can't remember if I did in the past. In my class where we read Inferno, that was like our assignment at one point was to like create our own circle of hell and like who would inhabit it and like what the fitting punishment would be. And that was very interesting. It was like a
Julia's
lot
like,
of
good times.
well, it's just like cool to see what other people were like, oh yeah, like you're right. They do suck for doing that. Good call.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good question, like to work on.
Yeah. Well, it's
Yeah.
also like hard to specifically, at least it was for me, to come up with something that didn't kind of fit into any of the other
Right.
categories. Or you had to be
Yeah.
like, okay, this is kind of a subcircle of this, but
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I also feel like Dante comes up with so many good punishments too. Like
Mhm.
you said, with being just buffeted by wind forever. It's like, well, you're not burning, but you are literally being thrown around like a little doll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the harpies one that you mentioned where it's like you're just being slowly eaten for eternity. Like I thought it was really interesting like the way like at the beginning of the section sometimes Dante via Virgil a lot of times would describe like kind of the theory behind like why like there's one part that I should have marked and of course I didn't where it's talking about how like these sins are grouped together because they are like a failure against others and then
Mhm.
these sins are grouped together because they're a failure within yourself and then like I don't know I just thought that was super interesting because there were a couple of times where like I started out thinking oh like I don't agree that doesn't make sense but then he describes it and I'm like oh okay I can see how this particular vice would be like outward versus inward focused. I just thought that was like very
Yeah.
interesting. Again, my favorite
Yeah.
adjective today.
Well, and I also what I find interesting is him calling out a lot of like big people in the church, like the Catholic
Mhm.
Church, for like being greedy or lying and stuff, which
Yeah.
I also am like, okay, good for you, because like the
Yeah.
Catholic Church was, still might be, super corrupt back then, you know?
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting that he was calling them out directly.
Like, listen. Although, wait, Kara, what were you saying like 1 minute ago?
About what were we
Oh,
just
okay,
talking
wait.
about?
The things that were in other like
Oh,
categories.
yes.
I like agreed with those categorizations in terms of like, oh yeah, if you are whatever, I don't know, like a false witness, then you belong with, you know, the what are even like the broader categories, like, you know, someone who's like traitorous and deceiving people, like whatever.
Yeah.
However, there were like so many categories like that where I was like, yeah, right section, wrong placement. Like this is way worse than this. Why is that one up
Yes.
there and this one down here? Like the fact that like people who like lied are worse than straight up murderers. I'm like, that's incorrect, Dante. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's one of the things that I thought was so like fascinating about this whole like piece is like the things it says about. I mean, I guess we don't know that Dante was reflecting all of his society's like beliefs, but like the things it says about what people consider like sinful and how bad they are, like what they consider unforgivable. Like the fact that like Judas is in the worst circle of hell, I think makes sense, like
Mhm.
literally killed God. But then the fact that like Brutus and Cassian are there, I'm like, I don't think Julius Caesar's on the same tier as Jesus. Like, I just thought that was so weird. Like, once again, we see that like real fixation on like the Greeks and the Romans. Like, yeah, I know there were a lot of times where he was talking about like the level of like evilness, and I'm like, I strongly disagree. Like, there were even some things where I'm like, I don't even consider this a sin. Like, I'm trying to find an example now, but it was something that like basically was like a mistake. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, it's bad when this happens, but like there wasn't like intent to do wrong. Let me see
Was
if I
it
can
like the
find one.
prostitute of the Thais or something?
Maybe,
oh,
maybe.
that's probably one. Yeah.
Let me see.
Yeah.
I'll like look while you guys are
Well,
talking.
Nana did write in a question, and I actually don't know the answer to this. Um, so like were any of the people Dante mentioned, like especially the Florentines, alive when the book came out? And I feel like for the most part, at least most of them were dead. Um, I actually don't know if like the politicians in particular
Yeah.
weren't.
I don't know
I'm
for a fact, but I
There's
think
yes.
probably people that he like referenced as being in hell were already dead.
Yeah, because like there's some people he mentions like seeing in the world above, and then there's a lot of them that aren't. So I would guess that most of them weren't. Um, yeah, so Nina, the worst circle of hell is for betrayers. So um that's why Judas was in that one.
Yeah.
And also the fact that only two people, it's like Caesar was famously killed by a whole bunch of people. Like, but I
yeah.
guess they were like the ringleaders, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Um
I I agree with you though that like okay, Judas makes sense. I could even see an argument for Brutus because he was the main conspirator. What's his name? Cassius?
Cassius, yeah, or Cassian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Him, I mean, him and Brutus as a whole are just bizarre, but like one I could see. But I feel like it's also putting Julius Caesar on the same level as Jesus.
I
And
just find that so weird.
I feel like there are a lot more betrayers in the Bible that
Yeah.
Dante could have picked from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just very interesting. Oh, I just remembered one of the other punishments that I was like, this is like uncomfortable and weird and very specific. That one where like the person and the like snake monster with legs like merge
Merge?
together and turn into each other. I was like, what?
Ew.
Like, what is happening? Like,
Until the scales, I thought that was going to be my least favorite one. I was like, this is messed up.
and it was like really well described. Like it was very specific about what was happening. I'm like, I got it. I got it.
The way
Wasn't
that
it also
there's
like the
some
snakes had
chapters.
like 6 legs or something?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know.
Because, like, in my mind, I was like, oh, that's just a lizard. And then it was, like, more legs than a normal lizard. And I was like, oh.
There was just lots of layers of like, why is this happening?
I mean, maybe it has the 4 lizard legs and the 2 human legs now. Did you ever consider that? Fun.
Dana, first off, Judas is a great character in Jesus Christ Superstar, so I feel that. I think the reason that betrayal is like, I think the reason that Judas is considered the worst is because he betrayed Jesus specifically. Although I do think that the wider like betrayal being worse than murder is weird. But I think it makes sense why Judas is considered one of the worst. I don't think it makes sense why the category of betrayers is considered worse than the category of murderers.
Yeah.
So,
I can see like overlap if like a betrayal led to a murder. So like Brutus betraying Caesar led to Caesar's assassination.
yeah.
But as a whole, like the category itself, like betrayal could mean so many things. Whereas murder tends to just be like that.
That is interesting too, because like you could consider, like many people would say like absolutely like cheating on someone is betraying them, but those people would end up in lust and not in betrayal. So it's like how do you, because it's got traitors to family, traitors to the nation, traitors to guests, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, the hospitality.
My brain was like red wedding, and traitors to benefactors as the worst one. So
yeah, and I think like that kind of goes with what we were saying about like what what values are like most important, because like the hospitality thing and the benefactors thing, and like I think there's even like they talk about specifically like the betrayal of like siblings or parents. I think they talk about patricide and fratricide maybe. And so like that is also a very like classical like Greek and Roman thing, is like murder can be, it can be bad sometimes, but like what's really bad is if you like kill a family member, or like you kill like your commander. Like the idea of like rank and like betrayal of rank, I think was considered like really, really bad. Which I just, very interesting. Oh, I think I found some of the descriptions that I was like, I don't know if I would consider this like a sin to be punished. Like one of the ones he says is like hoarders and wasters. And like waste, I think can be, but like, I don't know, maybe this is like 21st century like brain, but like hoarding something, like if it's hoarding something that like other people need and you're not giving them, yes. But if it's just like having stuff, I was like, I don't know that this is like a circle of hell kind of thing,
Yeah. You were a maximalist. You're going to hell, okay?
Dante was a big fan of Marie Kondo, I guess. Like, oh my gosh. Like, does this circle spark joy?
I'm picturing like Dante in his sad little house, like holding a picture of Beatrice as his only possession. He's like, this sparks joy. I'm keeping this.
and one of Virgil, like the two like photos.
Yep, that's it. Dante owned 3 things: a pen of some kind, a picture of Virgil, and a portrait of Beatrice. That's it.
Yes. His worldly possessions.
Yep.
A fun fact, I have been to Dante Alighieri's home in Florence.
Oh my gosh.
That's so cool.
It's so small. But people were a lot tinier back then.
Oh. I didn't even think about that, but yeah.
I was like walking through and I'm like, the doorways are small, like the ceiling's small, like short king. We love a short king.
I know. Well, that's truly my experience reading The Count of Monte Cristo, when they were describing Maximilian, and it was like, he was a babe, he had a great mustache, he was a cool dude, he was 5'4", and I was like, come again? 5'4". That's so small.
I'm so glad we invented vitamins. So we actually answered a few of my questions during that conversation. So I just want to know what you thought of the relationship between Dante and Virgil, because it seems to take on several different tones throughout it. And, I think it's hard to really get a grasp on it. So I wanted to know what you two thought.
I mean, Dante's definitely a big fan of Virgil. Sometimes like a child being cradled by a mother, and sometimes like boyfriends. And I think it's hard to tell too because just the stylistic choices of that time period are like so romantic that you can't always
Yeah.
tell like what kind of feelings are going on. Um I don't know. Basically, it's one of those things where I'm like, I would not be surprised like either way. Like either this was just like hero worship or like maybe Dante did have a crush on Virgil. Like either of those would make sense to me. I think there were a lot of uh like you said, Taylor, there's a lot of like different kinds of bond that they seem to have. But yeah. Also like vaguely like teacher student, which is a little weird when it
Mhm.
overlaps with these others. Um yeah.
Dante just had a lot of feelings.
He really
Yeah.
did. He really did.
Yeah. Can I read the quote of like the mother and child?
But he's
In this
Yes.
translation, at least, because I marked it. I was like, this is really tender and sweet, actually. Like, I loved the descriptions of like Virgil as a parental figure to Dante. So in mine, it goes, my leader in an instant caught me up. A mother, likewise, wakened by some noise, who sees the flames and sees them burning closer, will snatch her son and flee, and will not pause, caring less keenly for herself than him, to pull her shift or undershirt around her. And I was like, okay, that's kind of sweet.
it really is.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of varying degrees as to how Dante describes how he feels about Virgil.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the whole like mentor type aspect is the one that I kind of cling on to the most as like
Yeah.
the feeling I get. Because he is his like literal guide
Yeah.
through this journey. So it's like he also guides him as a writer and the
Yeah.
philosopher and that's
And
Yeah.
the like practice of like describing just like between two men as being like they're so handsome and strong and beautiful and tender and kind. It's like those are all things that like did not necessarily mean like this is just bros being bros, you know.
yeah.
It's like so it's hard to tell sometimes. It's like, is this homoerotic or like were you just comfortable in your masculinity and we don't have that same thing today?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the thing too. Like, obviously, we're looking at it through 21st century
Yeah.
lenses. And I do agree that most straight cis men should consider swooning into their friends' arms
Yeah.
on a more regular basis.
Being cradled like a child.
I love to see it.
Exactly. I like I said, I think part of it is because like when I first heard of Dante's Inferno, it was around that like little meme online where like Dante is writing fan fiction or something, and Dante's
Yes.
mom's like, Dante, stop writing your fan fiction. So I already went in with the whole like, okay, Dante's got a crush on Virgil.
Yeah.
And you do see it. It's like almost romantic. It's hero worship. It's like he sees him as a teacher, he sees him as a guide. He takes on all of these other roles, and he also has to take on a more paternalistic role because he's the one who knows most about this sort of realm and is guiding him through it. I will say there is this one line. This is the one I told you I read, and I was like, okay. And then he put his arms around my neck and kissed my face and said, "Indignant soul, blessed is she in whose womb you were conceived." And I was like,
All right.
why are you saying it? Your mom was so blessed to give birth to you.
I feel like any compliment that involves womb is just like
Yeah. Why that?
why? Yeah.
That was such an
Question.
odd thing to say.
Okay, wait.
Yeah.
Taylor, you spurred a question in me and then I forgot it because you talked about Dante's mother's womb. I lost my train of thought. Okay, go back. What were you saying? Fan fiction.
Seeing Virgil as a paternalistic person because he's his like guide.
Okay, good work. You did it. You spurred it back into my brain.
Okay, cool.
So I have a question that hopefully one of you knows the answer to, but it's okay if you don't. I'm so curious about, because like as they're traveling through hell, and Virgil's like repeatedly telling all these demons, like, hey, back off. I'm allowed to walk him through here. I was given permission, like whatever, that whole thing.
Mhm.
But like he knows the way. So like when has he done this before? Was he guiding someone else? Did he just do this for funsies? Like when it was just him? Like it seems like Virgil's like, yeah, I'm aware and I can tell you about each of these things. Like, why is he the official tour guide? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I kind of figured it was just because he's like the best of the best. He's like Mr. Afterlife expert. Like he's not quite good enough to get into heaven yet, but you're like the top dog, Like so I don't know if I thought about like previous experience he might have had so much as like he's just an expert. Like that's I don't know though. It's not nearly as thoughtful of an answer as your question was,
But it's an acceptable answer because this might be the case. Like,
I don't know.
Virgil, you are one prayer away from getting the bump up to purgatory. So
Yeah.
why don't you be the leader this time?
Yeah.
Trickle down blessings.
Yeah, or even the fact that like we're told that like Beatrice is the reason this happened. It's because she like put in a good word with God and is like, hey, Dante is like making some mistakes, but he's really not a bad guy. Like, let's just show him and he'll do better, I promise. And the fact that like it's because of Beatrice, because she's like in the top tier of heaven. She's great. Maybe it's that like Virgil was given extra powers on behalf of Beatrice, like making this request. Like
True.
I mean, because we know Virgil's a big fan of Dante, apparently. So
Yeah.
he's like, I'll take this one. Let me do it.
And that would just be more effective anyways. She's like, listen, if we want to convince Dante to do good things, let his mentor tell him what's up. Like that'll really convince him.
Those couple of parts where like Dante's asking Virgil, he's like, so theoretically, if somebody did a bad thing and it like was this kind of bad, like it was just so weird. Like I couldn't figure out what Dante was specifically doing that was like bad, but we still have a chance. Like what was his sin? What is he doing?
It was lust. It was all about Beatrice.
That would make sense, honestly. Like it was just like so weird because he kept alluding to it. Like I don't know, so vague.
So if I did a sin, could I still get in heaven? Maybe.
Yeah. It's just like he was so specific. He's like, I'm asking for a friend who might be named Dante. Like, what kind of punishment are we talking here? Theoretically, like, what did you do? Why are you here? I kind of got the feeling it might have been related to him not being quite as religious as he should be. Like, there were a couple of references to that, but I don't know. It was just kind of funny as like kept bringing it up. What were you going to say, Taylor? Sorry.
I was just going to say, it was so dumb. I was going to say, like, man, when I had a crush on someone, I made their character in The Sims, but Dante wrote an entire epic.
That is dedication. Yeah.
He was next level.
Yeah.
So another question I have before we get to a little game. I took Julia's game idea and I sort of ran with it. But my last question is, were you surprised that Dante was pretty sympathetic to a lot of the people in hell? Like there were a few that he was like, you suck, you're where you deserve, go to hell. Oh wait, you're already there. And like
stay in hell.
Yeah.
But there were like others that he like would cry over.
Yeah. And I thought that was really nice. Like there's one time where he is like there's a few times where he's like very overcome by how like sad this is, by his empathy. And Virgil's like, don't cry over them. They don't deserve it. I'm like, I think that's kind of important that you could still feel empathy, even if sometimes. Yeah, I did think that was interesting. The thing I thought was weird is that it was like really inconsistent feeling to me. Like there were there were times where Dante was very sympathetic, and then there were times where he had just like punk kid energy. He's like, "Yeah, your city's stupid. I'm gonna kick dirt in your face." Like there's those people that were like buried almost like their whole body, and like Dante like would dig them out and he'd be like talking to them. It was just like so strangely described, and it seemed like there was no like consistent like characterization for Dante or for like how we were supposed to feel about it, because like sometimes we were supposed to feel sympathy and sometimes he's like, "Yeah, well, you shouldn't have been from Verona then, you little bitch." Like it was just weird.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I have an answer. I just had like questions. I'm like, what is going on? Like this seems like you have a lot of conflicting feelings, Dante.
Yeah. It made sense to me that, like, you know, again, back to the circle of lust, my favesies, that he was like so sympathetic for their story. Cause I'm like, yeah, you're a lover too. Like, you get this. Like, you just feel bad for these people. So that one resonated as like, okay, I get why he's reacting this way. Some of them, I was like, wow, he seems really, really shook by this one. And I can't like totally pin down why, but I'm glad that he's like, I don't know, like to me, that feels like more human to have a reaction to the suffering of others, even if they were someone who did something bad, is to be like, whoa, okay, they are really going through it. But okay, so the only thing I don't remember actually anything important about it, but like one of the few things I remember talking about in my class was the whole political divide between the white Guelphs and the black Guelphs. And I don't know what either one stood for, but they're mentioned several times in Inferno. And I think Dante was on the side of the white Guelphs. Anyways, so I think a lot of the times when he was like, yeah, suck it, it was just because they were like, an Italian Republican, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So that's what I took from it. Anytime he was like, whatever, I was like, oh yeah, other political party.
I also thought it was funny when some of the people getting punished like sassed him. Like he was like, "Hey, will you like tell me like your story?" And he like spit on him or something. And Dante's like, "Well, just for that, I think you deserve it." Like it's just so weird. Like
like
what?
Dante, they're really going through it right now. They might not want to talk to you.
Right? Like there was yeah, or like sometimes Dante would start it. Like he'd be like all up in their face and being like, you know, talking about, you were saying, Julia, like the political divide. He's like, "We're doing great. Your city sucks. It's the worst city." Like there's that whole diatribe about how like all the Italians from this one part of Italy are the worst. Why are they still on the earth? Like he would just be like going off about it. And then like the person who is also being tortured as all of this is happening says something bitchy back, and Dante's like, Virgil, we're leaving. Like
Yeah. What I found really surprising for someone of that time period, like he still put his ex teacher Brunetto Latini in hell, but there was this element of like sympathy, and you can feel like a lot of love for Brunetto in a way that I find very interesting to come from someone from the 1200s, where he's still not there enough to be like, hey, maybe this isn't a sin. But there is a lot of, I don't know, like I said, there's a lot of love in that canto for his teacher.
Agreed.
And like all those places that like I would mentioned earlier, like all those places where he'll ask Virgil, like, is there any hope for people? Like when like the first place they visit where it's like basically all the pagans who are good people, and the answer is not no, which again is not like the best response, but like considering the time, I think that's pretty impressive that there was some kind of understanding that like being a good person was more important than specifically like what or who you believe in. And that happens a few times. Like one of the pages I marked is when Virgil says something about how like he believes that they'll move on someday or something. Like I just thought that was another one of those parts where it's like, okay, like this is more than I expected from this like kind of thing. So,
Mhm.
but I agree, Taylor. I think
Yeah.
there is a lot of love there.
Yeah. I like that
Uh,
because it's like, yeah, someone can be really flawed, like very deeply, in whatever vice or, and you can still like care about that person and, feel respect towards them in other aspects or, like whatever it is. And I just like that little bit of nuance there.
Yeah.
yeah. So unless you guys have anything else to say, I want to play my little game and then we can share quotes.
Before we do the game, will you pull up Nana's last comment?
Oh, yes, please.
I got it
Not
ready.
yes, please. Will do. So Nana asked, I need to know how Virgil is pronounced in Italian.
According to Google Translate, play, you little jerk. Why is it not doing it now? Okay, well, you guys don't get to hear, but I heard it earlier. It said Virgilio.
Virgilio.
Yeah. It doesn't want to play it. Virgilio.
Nice.
It's good to know. We should have been calling him Virgilio this entire time.
Yeah.
It is kind of endearing. Okay, game.
So the game I have is I have taken a few characters / villains from past classics that we've read, and I think it would be really interesting if we sorted them into a circle of hell.
Yes!
Cool.
Let's do it.
So the first one I have is Heathcliff from Wuthering Heights.
See, this is an interesting one because I almost feel, and this harkens back to my class now. Harkens is my word of the day. I've said it twice now. I'm like, when do I say harkens in real life? Twice in one day today. Because this like makes me think of my class. Because when I think of Heathcliff, rather than like any specific sin, I think his vice is just like obsession and stubbornness and not being able to let go of anything like negative or positive to him. Like he just can't let go. And so that's like almost its own thing. So I have to figure out where I would put him. Share your thoughts, Kara.
I feel like maybe wrath, because I feel like that is what leads him to do all the other things he does. Because I also thought violence, but I feel like for Heathcliff, his violence is specifically because of wrath. And I feel like that kind of goes with what you were saying, Julia, about like stubbornness and obsession. And yeah.
Yeah, the wrathful feels accurate.
Nana asks if that is the guy with the woman in the basement.
She's
no,
in the
but you did
attic,
predict
and
one of the
it's a
characters
different
coming
one.
up.
Yeah.
Heathcliff was the.
Oh yeah, she caught herself. Taylor, you're frozen.
No.
Come back, I need this game.
We've literally been training for this the entire book club. Like,
Okay, wait, you're back. You're back. What else?
Okay, cool. Did I like freeze or something?
You were
Yeah.
frozen for a second.
Oh, that's wild.
She got there.
Yes. Heathcliff is the weirdo from Wuthering Heights. I like the idea of wrath, Kara. My first thought was lust because of the whole digging up Catherine's corpse to cuddle with her, which is something else. But I think wrath is a much better place to put him.
Yeah.
I think it encompasses all his various evil things.
Yeah. When you're like willing to say like, I saved this kid, but I should have let you fall to your death. Like that feels pretty wrathful to me.
Yeah. And like revenge, I feel like would go in the wrath category, and Heathcliff's whole personality is revenge. Like
so next up I have 2 Three Musketeers characters. The first one is D'Artagnan, because I can't stand that little boy.
Now you were gonna call him a little bitch for a second.
Yeah, he is, but
So I don't know if any of you guys have a one off the top of
Literally,
your
like,
head.
in my circle of hell map
Oh,
going,
Julia, you're okay. We're freezing.
I know I'm frozen.
You
Am I
were for a
back?
second there.
Yeah.
Ugh,
It's like off
I
and
don't know
on.
what's going on with us, you guys.
Okay, I need to look for like a succinct description of the circles because scrolling back and forth through this massive article is not quick enough for
Yeah,
me.
that's why I have my map out. I'm like,
Okay. Let's see. Because yeah, it is confusing because there's all those like subsets that we were talking about. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, like I would feel comfortable putting D'Artagnan in the hypocrites circle. Like that's pretty low,
Ooh.
but
Yeah.
I think yeah, hypocrite would be a good one. I also and there's like this automatic association to me because like D'Artagnan is one of the characters who like full on sexually assaults somebody. So like that to me would say lust. Like I just think of like sexual crimes as being with lust, but like I think hypocrite kind of covers all of that because he's supposed to be this like honorable knight who's doing good stuff and he's a piece of shit.
Yeah. And then acts like Milady is the worst person in the world.
Yeah.
I'm like, she was right. Speaking of Milady, she's our next one.
purgatory. She did nothing wrong. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, I love Milady too, but
I know.
I
She
would
did some bad
say
things.
fraud and malice. Because
mm,
like her like malice I think really well describes the fact that while she started out with like yeah take revenge on those horrible people who did this to you, she kills a bunch of people who didn't do anything wrong and like it's out of malice like for other people.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's where I
She
would
does
maybe think.
also like make that guard fall in love with her. When
Yeah.
she's in jail, she's acting like this like poor, helpless woman.
Would you not? That's
Oh no, I
exactly what I would
would.
do if I was in jail. I'd be like, oh, you should fall in love with me and then get me out of jail. I don't like it here.
Please, Julia, I would be flashing ankle left and right.
But yeah,
I am
that
not
feels
built for
correct. Yeah.
prison. Are we good with fraud and malice for
Yeah.
Milady?
Yeah, I think the description like lists them both together, so
Okay.
I mean, there's some fraud involved in her.
right. I think like the
yeah.
deception thing makes me think of that. So I'm still trying to find a good map of
They're all a little different.
yeah. Keep going, sorry.
Mr. Rochester from Jane Eyre.
My nemesis.
One of my favorite literary men just because he's so ridiculous.
He is. Okay, let's see. Because like one of the things about Rochester is like he has so many different flavors of bad.
That's
like,
what I was going to say. It depends on how you want to peg him, because if you go like super literal, you could be like, well, he tried to become a bigamist, so you could put him in like, you know, violence against God, or like, do you want to
or lust?
Put him in lust, which is pretty high up there, so that's a little kind.
Yeah. If I'm thinking, because I haven't been thinking about the placement of the circles so much. So if I'm, yes, Nina.
That's so the attic man.
If I'm thinking of like where placement wise as like a factor, I think if you want to like think of the iconic thing he does, I think betrayer. Yeah. I think he could be considered a betrayer with his big thing that he does.
It does a spouse count as family? Is that traitor to family?
I would say so, because
yeah.
I mean, obviously, I don't know if I'm pretty sure this wasn't the case in like the 1800s or even the 1200s when Dante's Inferno was written, but like, you know, when you're in a hospital, your next of kin would be your spouse, and then like parents or children, and
right.
Again, I hate. Sorry, this translation again is killing me, because in Sins of Deceit, the section against like people who don't have cause to trust you, level like 9 in here is called rabble rousers, and I'm like, that sounds too innocent. Rabble rousers. That's like a bunch of 4th graders. Okay.
Yeah. Like, I feel like what they're getting at is, like, inciting a violent mob,
Yeah.
not like, yeah, not like I pushed Timmy
Yeah.
in the playground.
Yeah. Here they have counselors of violence. I'm like, that feels more accurate.
Yes, I finally found a good map. Shout out to this random person on DeviantArt.
Woo.
But it also reminded me one of the other sins that I was like, this is bad, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as you guys think of it, is like the counterfeiters. I'm like, yeah, printing, like making false money, not a good thing to do. Don't do that. But is it worse than all these other things? I don't think so. Why is this like considered such a, like, it's one of the lowest levels, like the fraudulent, like, and falsifiers of it's falsifiers of coins is like one of the last things before you get to like the traders. Like, I just don't think that counterfeiting money is like barely one step above Judas, like killing Jesus. I just think that's weird.
I agree.
Maybe
Like, again,
Dante was personally like offended or like
he was personally
scammed by
cheated with some
counterfeit.
yeah, he was personally cheated with some false money. Like, again, I don't endorse like counterfeiting money. I think that's bad, but like the level here is just weird.
Yep.
I like the reassurance that you don't endorse like counterfeiting money, because I love the idea of like you being canceled for that on like a live show. Nana's like pulling screen grabs.
I know, just to put it out there, I do not endorse counterfeiting money. Like, I'm just saying, if you're gonna do that, it's better than killing someone.
Yeah, I feel like Rochester could be in several places. I will say putting him in Lust and the idea of him being buffeted through the winds while screaming like Jane is like hilarious. But we can move on to my next character. We have two more.
Did we decide where we want to put him? I feel like we should sentence him real quick.
Did we say fraud?
I mean, yeah,
that is
he could go with seducers in fraud, because that's kind of what happens.
Yes,
Seducer is a good one.
Seducer and fraud. I think that's his personality. I like it. Nana, no. Betrayed.
Nana and I are in cahoots to have you canceled.
Whenever I say the word betrayed, I think of the part from Great Comet where like Dolokhov is just like betrayed, and it's like so dramatic because that's like the loudest line. And it just makes me laugh. Anyway, sorry, Taylor. Go ahead.
No, you're totally good. We have two more. We have Rebecca De Winter from Rebecca.
Ooh.
Every single thing you've said in this game makes Cara and I react the exact same way. We're applauding. We're going, ooh. Oh, man.
I mean, I feel like what the book was saying was the worst thing she did was like the sleeping around. But I feel like when we were talking about it, the worst thing she did was that like she fooled everyone into thinking she liked them. Because that just seems mean.
Yeah.
Like, as a person with social anxiety, that's always what I'm worried about, is that like I'm talking to somebody and they're like, oh my god, I hate her. Like,
Rebecca De Winter is basically Regina in Mean Girls, where she's like, that's such a cute skirt, where'd you get it?
Okay,
that is the ugliest epic skirt I've ever seen in my life.
So flatterers? Is she going in flatterers?
I think flatterers is good. Where does that rank?
It's in simple fraud. So like
simple fraud.
You know, like against others who don't have cause to trust you.
Yeah. Or I think who do have cause to trust you, because she like actively.
So fraud, like, betrayal against guests. That's really low.
I think betrayal against guests or family, because obviously her betrayal of Maxim was big. Although if we're ranking Maxim, like
okay, I did put him on the list, but I was like, I feel like maybe I should cut him for time, but we can also rank Maxim while we're here.
Just every circle. Just let him cycle through again and again.
He can replace Cassius in the deepest circle of
Yeah.
hell.
I mean, I feel like technically he should go in murderers, but I feel like there should be like a special extra circle for creeps. Like where almost all of the fictional men we've read about would like end up in that circle.
The circle of creeps.
Circle of creeps.
We've created our own circle, the circle of creeps, where it's just the three of us going, ew, ew.
Yeah. Jail.
Yeah. See, yeah, that is the thing about these two is like they don't, some of the like crimes or sins don't take into account motive. So like
Yeah.
it could be a murder because you wanted to marry her wife, or it could be a murder because you're getting revenge on them, or it's like, so what, it's just murder is murder. Like, I don't know. It does the betrayal, if you kill someone who trusted you, is that betrayal or is that murder?
Right.
I don't know.
I feel like
And also
putting
like
murders
oh sorry,
together.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Taylor. I feel like putting murders together makes sense to me if you think of like not all deaths being considered murder. Do you know what I mean? Like, because I imagine like soldiers in battle, they wouldn't assume that would be murder. Like, but I get what you mean about like there being different levels, like different like I don't know, concentrations almost of like evilness. Like, yeah, I see what
Well,
you
kind
mean.
of like what we have in the US, where you have like second-degree murder, third-degree
Yeah.
murder, first-degree
Yeah.
murder, manslaughter, where it's like, okay, was this an accident? Was this spur of the moment? Did you plan it? Like stuff like that,
Yeah.
and each one has its own punishment.
Yeah,
like
is there a
neglect.
separate circle in the murderer circle where like you planned it, yours is worse, sorry?
Yeah. Yeah.
I also feel like in the 1200s, where Dante is writing this, people were having duels like all the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
So true.
So last person from a more recent read of ours, we have Fraulein Rottenmeier from Heidi,
Ooh.
because I really didn't like her. I feel like she's not all the way down there. She's like,
not like compared to the other ones you've given us, I think she's like less objectionable, but she's still not great. Let's see.
Sorry, I love the comment from Nana of, did Mr. Lucifer decide the hell rules?
I feel like it's just Dante coming up with these. Like,
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Let me think. I mean, I feel like you could put her in violence against others because it's like
I was gonna say.
yeah, it's like violence through like neglect, like she's not like beating Heidi or the other girl whose name I just forgot. But she's also not treating them very well at all. Yeah. I think I'd say violence against others.
Yeah. Violence is good. I was thinking like wrath, because for some reason she just has beef with the child for no reason.
That's a good one
also
too.
Fair.
Yeah.
Like I still don't. Yeah, I liked Heidi so much, like the character, that I'm like, why does everyone dislike her?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that's the end of my little game. We actually made it through everyone. I was gonna cut Mr. De Winter for time, but we ended up going through that too.
We had to rank him.
We're too passionate about it.
I like that we volunteered him. Like, you hadn't even told us he was on the list. We're like, wait, let's rank this son of a bitch too. Like,
let's throw him in hell.
Yeah.
So, unless anyone has anything else to say on Dante's Inferno, I figured we could share quotes now.
Yeah.
Yes. I actually have some.
Yeah. I saved quite a few quotes. Well, here, I know I have one ready to go because it's the only one I saved. Oh, did you hear it? My phone finally just went, Virgilio.
It's such a thing to hear with like no prep.
That was weird. Anyways, I was going to say, I saved one on my phone because I was like, this is like maybe my favorite quote, and I didn't want to lose it. Not of life, but like of this text. And it is, again, no one is surprised from that canto about the circle of lust. I was just enthralled with it. I love this line. There's no sorrow greater than, in times of misery, to hold at heart the memory of happiness.
I marked
kidding
that
me?
one. I marked
Break
that
my
one too.
heart.
This is interesting though, because this is how different translations can be. Because I marked that, but the line in my edition is, "There is no greater pain than to remember happy times in times of misery,
Oh, that's good too, though.
and this your teacher knows."
Yes, yeah, I just cut it off before that. I was like, I don't care what Virgil knows.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that one too. Let's see.
If you're still looking, Cara, I have mine.
Yeah, go for it.
So this is another one where I believe I read a different version last time I read this, because the quote I think is a little more beautiful in that one, but it still brings a little tear to my eyes. And like I said, I've always been pleasantly surprised by the love shown to Brunetto Latini. So when he's going to join the other people in his hellish running circle, he says, "Then he turned back and seemed like one of those who run Verona's race across its field to win the green cloth prize. And he was like the winner of the group, not the last one in." And in a lot of versions, it's like, "And it seemed for a second that he was leading, not the one behind," or something. And it's just, it gets me every time, because it's like, because I think he refers to him as a paternal figure too. It's like, it gets me.
I love that.
Yeah. This is one of the quotes I liked from Dante talking to Virgil. Because Virgil basically says something like, "Oh, why aren't you like telling me what's on your mind?" And he says, "I never would, my lord, my trusted guide, keep, save for brevity, my heart from you." Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, this is one of the ones Dante asks, "Master, will these torments increase after the great judgment, or lessen, or stay as fierce?" And he to me, "Remember your science, which says that the more perfect a thing is, the more it feels pleasure and pain. Though these accursed ones will never achieve true perfection, they will be nearer to it after than before." So it's kind of like that same thing. Is like he's still like lukewarm about them having a chance, but they do have one. Let's see. Okay, wait.
I'm literally just flipping through all my tabs.
I know. I even was trying to do this before we started. I always have to figure out why I took a picture of this page.
This is a less serious one, but I was like, well, that's some fun imagery. I just have this line that says, "Down here, they sang, you'll tango in the dark."
Wait, really?
Yeah. It's from Canto 21. I want to see how the other, because again, this is what I mean by sometimes the translation just seems so goofy to me. I'm like,
Yeah.
"You'll tango?"
Here's what line?
What's that, Taylor?
21.
I asked Julia Canto 21, and like what line?
118.
118.
I don't even have lines marked on mine, which just seems bad. But
this might be off, because here they're talking about like sort of a soldier thing. Front and center, Alikino Cabrina.
I just lost it.
He shouted his commands. "You too, Cagnaza."
I'm sorry. It's not 118. I had the wrong thing open. It's line 53.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Okay. We have, "With 100 prongs or more, they pricked him, shrieking, 'You've got to do your squirming under cover. Try learning how to cheat beneath the surface.'"
Oh.
You'll tango in the dark is so much more fun, though.
These translations are so different.
Yeah, my other one is even so different from either of those. It's like, "Down here, you have to dance covered up, and if you can, grab secretly." Like, what? None of these are related sentences.
Crap, what? This is the one I was talking about where he's like, oh man, these are the worst people in the whole country. He says, Genoese, men divorced from all morality and filled with every corruption. Why are you not dispersed from the earth?
Jesus.
I found the worst spirit of Romagna was one of you, who for his actions even now bathes as a soul in Cositus and still seems alive on earth in his own body. Like like that's so much energy. Like he's like, Genoese, men divorced from all morality.
It's like,
Why are you
whoa,
not
whoa.
why are you not dispersed from the earth? Like he's like, why did
Grandpa
you just
Dante's getting a bit racist.
yeah, it's like, why did you just get annihilated? Like, what is going on? Let's see.
Okay, so this is from like The Circle with Thieves, and this has nothing to do with like themes or just like depth or whatever. I just thought it was beautiful imagery, and I was like, Dante, pop off. And again, this is subject to translation because I'm sure my other one does not say baby boyish, but this one does. In that still baby boyish time of year, when sunlight chills its curls beneath Aquarius, when nights grow shorter, equaling the day, and hoarfrost writes fair copies on the ground to mimic in design its snowy sister. I was like, this is just a pretty way to say like the beginning of winter, and I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think regardless of the translations, you do get a lot of really like pretty sentences.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Some of the description was lovely. And then sometimes it was something like, how did it describe it? He was like talking about like the sun making the imprint of his self upon the ground, and he's just going on and on. I'm like, your shadow. That's what you're
It's
telling me, your
shadow.
shadow. But yeah, the writing was very pretty. So here's another one of the parts I was talking about. I forget who's talking here, but one of the people who's a pagan and also possibly did bad things, I don't remember. After my body had been pierced by 2 mortal wounds, I rendered my spirit to him who pardons willingly. My sins were terrible, but infinite goodness has such a wide embrace it accepts all those who turn to it. And he goes on. But no one is so lost by the malediction of that excommunication that eternal love may not turn back to him as long as hope is green. It is true that those who die disobedient to the Holy Church, even though they repent at the end, must remain outside this bank for 30 times the duration of their life of insolence, unless such decree is shortened by the prayers of the good. See now if you can give me delight by telling my good Costanza how you saw me, and also of my ban, since much benefit arises here through the prayers of those who are still over there. So he's saying, like, put in a good word for me, ask people to pray so that my sentence is shortened. But he's going to get there in the end. Like, that's surprising to me. Like, I like that.
Yeah.
But like 30 years in purgatory for
I
a pagan baby? Like,
oh no, I think this was somebody
oh,
who
this was like below. No, but
yeah.
like 30 times. So I'm imagining an infant, and that's 30
Oh, I
years.
know. Yeah, the whole like limbo thing, like the Catholic Church stopped teaching that a while back because they were like, this is actually pretty messed up. Like
It seems not.
it's not really their fault. So let's just not do that. Yeah. Yeah. Still trying to remember why I took this picture.
Okay, I got all my faves out of my system.
Let's see. Okay, so here's kind of an example too of like the language to describe some of these people. Oh wait, maybe this might be in the purgatory section. The one that I just shared might have been in purgatory. So never mind.
Cool.
Because there was another one that talks about spirits who ended well, already chosen by the same peace that I believe is awaited by you all. So I think Virgil says that in purgatory. So I'm sharing extra. Sorry. Let's
I like it
see.
though. It lets us know what's coming up.
There you
Mhm.
go. Coming attractions. Um, okay, so speaking of just like good language, um, and I rendered myself on that dark shore like one who unwishes what he wished, and changes his purpose after changing his mind, so that he leaves off what he began completely, since in thought I consumed action that had been so ready to begin.
Ooh.
Yeah, some good wordplay there.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like the word unwishes.
On wishes, yeah.
Yeah.
And like the combination of changes his purpose after changing his mind.
Yeah.
I like that. That Dante, he has a turn of phrase.
It's almost like he was a good poet or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yep.
I do wish I like knew Italian just to like for the like rhythm and flow of it, like rhyming, because we lose that in translation and it
Yeah.
bums me out.
Yeah.
Because there were so many footnotes in mine that were like, notice these 3 words and this rhyme scheme. And I'm like, no, I don't notice them because it's in English. They don't rhyme anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those are the ones that I remember marking. Let's see. Is this? Okay, this was, I think, the language thing where he's like, some things he can't even describe. If I had words rough and hoarse enough to fit the dismal chasm on which all the other rocky cliffs weigh and converge, I would squeeze out the juice of my imagination more completely. But since I have not, I bring myself, not without fear, to describe the place. To tell of the pit of the universe is not a task to be taken up lightly, nor in a language that has words like mommy and daddy. But may the muses, those ladies who helped Amphion shut Thebes behind its walls, aid my speech so that my words may not vary from the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yep. I think those are all of mine.
Good quotes, everyone.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lynn has begun screaming again.
No, I love
I thought I
it.
heard him.
Never apologize for a kitty. Like,
But unless you guys had anything else to say about Dante's Inferno, Cara can introduce us to our next month's choice.
yes, I believe that's Agnes Grey. Yeah, and I have mine, but I didn't grab it, of course.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte, which actually is going to be a reread for me because I read it earlier for a different live show. And it's very short, actually. My edition's only like 200 pages. And I feel like, yeah, I
because
feel
it
like
has
it's
tiny
one,
typeface.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's tiny.
I feel like it's one that I need to like give some like expectations for because I liked it a lot more than most people do, and I think I was like well prepared for it. So like it's very different from Tenet of Wildfell Hall. The main character frustrates some people because she's a goody two shoes, even though I liked her. And it's like very character focused. Also, the romance is a really, really small subplot. So I really liked it, but don't expect it to be like a big part of the story.
Well, I
Those are my
love character-driven books, and I love goody two-shoes characters. 'Cause
yes.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah. Like
Have you read Agnes Grey, Julia?
Mm-mm.
Okay, cool.
I was going to read it for the same read-along, and I failed. And so I was like, well, I'll just wait now.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to read it in between the two. That seems silly. So
yeah, I'm excited. I'm already looking forward to reading it again, which is always a good sign. So yeah, that's going to be on my channel. Follow our Twitter for whenever we do the live show. We are all committing to be better about giving enough warning. So
yes.
we're
Exactly. Yes.
And
We're
I'm
working
going
on
to
that.
update it with our new book right now.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Julia. That's also a good thing to remember. So yeah, that's what we're reading next. Very excited.
Yeah. So nice. And I'm super excited to read another Bronte book.
Yeah.
So thank you, Cara and Julia, for joining me to talk about the world's greatest fanboy, Dante.
Yes.
And thank you, Lan, for putting your butt right in the screen.
Yes.
Well done.
Important.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lan.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, boy.